Hello, and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joseph Arthur, PMW's Multimedia editor. We've got a very big show this week, folks. Some hard-hitting topics and really interesting discussions have been had. Opening up the episode, our premium content editor, Jyoti Rambhai, is back in the studio to join me for a discussion about the latest IPA Bellwether Report for Q3 of 2024, which saw a dramatic freeze in ad spend growth. First time in 14 quarters that things haven't grown quarter over quarter. Are alarm bells going off? Are people being reasonable and staying steady? You'll have to stay tuned for all the discussions around that hot topic. Of course, a big element of the ad spend freeze, people think from our reaction, is the upcoming autumn budget, which is set to go out tomorrow. We'll finally get an idea of the new Labor government's fiscal policies for those listeners of you based here in the UK. Following that discussion with Jyoti, I'm joined by Dyana, Najdi, Managing Director of UK and Ireland Partners and Specialists at, drumroll please, Google. Dyana talks to me about the current state of search and what competition from the likes of TikTok, Instagram, other social media have done to consumer expectations and the discovery and broader search landscape. We also touch on Google's partnership with YouTube and what YouTube can now offer advertisers on both the long form and short form content fronts. And finally, I couldn't talk to an insider from Google without touching on AI, because Google is certainly synonymous with AI and generative AI in particular at that. So Dyana and I talk about the AI arms race, as we've dubbed it here. We unpack just how hot competition is from the big AI players, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Perplexity, and we dive into what we can expect from the future of AI. Are things going to continue to innovate as rapidly as they have? What are the safeguards that are in place for brands and advertisers looking to invest? And what's Google's approach to their AI innovation? So I'm sure I've piqued all of your interest there somehow, some way. If not, I don't know what you're doing listening to a performance marketing podcast. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Jyoti Rambhai, hello. Welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked studio on a lovely autumnal day. The sun is shining.
Yes, it's quite nice. It's cold, but it's one of those crisp mornings, as I like to call it.
I was going to say crisp, fresh. You get out of bed, you get outside, heading on the commute to work, and you're for a moment there, you're like, "Oh, this is quite nippy." But then you warm up, get some blood pumping, and it's really, really quite nice and lovely.
Yeah, I walk into the office, so it's actually quite a nice walk.
I recently moved, and it's extended the walk I take each day as well. I'm quite enjoying my morning walks as well. It's just wakes me up, and particularly when the weather's like this, where the sun's coming up, it's nice and crisp and autumnal. I've been really loving it. I have a feeling I'm going to love it less and less as things get a little bit colder and notably darker as well.
I do quite like the morning walks into the office. I get what you're saying, but actually, having done it a couple of years now, it's actually not too bad. It's when it's raining. That's when I'm like, okay.
Might encourage me to purchase an umbrella, which is something I've managed to avoid having lived in the UK for 3.5 years.
How?
You wouldn't believe it. Yeah, I've been able to do without. I've been able to, sort of hold myself up whenever it's raining, and I never need to get on the move. That's enough about my spending habits, though, or lack thereof. We're going to jump into the spending habits of the UK advertising and marketing sector, because the Q3 IPA Bellwether Report was released a couple of weeks ago now, and it set off some alarm bells, it's fair to say, because Q3 saw, for the first time in 14 quarters, budgets fail to grow. There was no growth because quarter on quarter, there was 0% change.
Yeah, I know. It's I don't want to use the word alarming, but I think...
I just did.
I know. I don't think it's something to be concerned about. The industry is being very cautious. And like it said in the Bellwether Report, a lot of it's down to putting budgets on hold ahead of the autumn budget that comes out tomorrow.
That's the big talking point. And you're right, because it was 15.9% growth in Q2, which was super, super healthy. We've had 3 years where quarter over quarter there's always been growth. So it is a bit alarming, the fact that things have completely stalled. But as you said, the sudden cautious approach, it appears to have been a response to the new Labour government here in the UK and some of the rhetoric surrounding the upcoming autumn budget. Because having looked at the reaction to the news now, some people, interestingly enough, we put up a poll on LinkedIn and more people than not said that there was cause to be concerned and worried. But perhaps that's all it is. It's not alarm bells. It's just some concern. And, well, this is something to watch, and let's hope course corrects heading into the golden quarter when we really want to encourage spend. But you're probably right. I think people are just holding their ad spend for Q3, which is a bit of a down quarter anyway.
Yeah.
And ready for big investment in Q4 once the government's fiscal plans become a little bit clearer.
Yeah, and I think in the lead up to the elections, Labour's manifesto, a lot of the stuff around their fiscal policies was vague. So I think it's quite understandable from the industry's perspective to be like, oh, let's just wait and see what's going to happen, especially considering Q4 is their biggest season every year. That's why we call it the golden quarter.
The golden quarter, the festive season, peak shopping season. It's when we see all of the sales events. It's the time for marketers, particularly to those in performance, to drive a lot of lower funnel, quick conversions, make sure they hit their targets.
Exactly. So they want to know where they're going, basically.
Well, what about our listeners who want to know where things are headed and they don't want to hear just from us about what we think? Because we postulated a lot, everything from Labour running a shrewd campaign to their response since taking office, the latest IPA Bellwether and what it might not mean. But what about the industry experts? Because we've spoken to a lot of them. Have there been any interesting comments that have stuck out to you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, we're coming off the back of a very challenging economic times. Spoke to one person, Anthony Abuzid from the Kite Factory, and he was saying, to put it into context, last year the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, attempted to lower inflation in the UK to 2.9% by the end of the year and predicted growth to reach roughly 1.8%. Now, instead, what happened was inflation increased to 4% and growth sort of stagnated to a rate of about 0.1%. And that's on top of the cost of living crisis. And I love what he said here. The cost of living crisis, which was driven by a Prime Minister who was outlasted by lettuce. I thought that was brilliant. We all know who he's referring to and what started this. And that was Liz Truss's mini budget in 2022. The
mini budget, which had a big economic impact.
Yeah.
Certainly not a mini one.
And, advertising industry felt that all throughout last year.
But it served as a bedrock, really, for optimism in a lot of ways when you're comparing it to the broader UK economy. The fact that in spite of all those challenging times and coming out of the pandemic, quarter over quarter growth was something we continued to see.
Yeah, and even last year, actually. So Q4 2023 saw a net increase of about 14.7% in marketing spend. And at the end of the year, ad spend was up by 1% year on year, reaching about £9 billion. So, as an industry, and this is probably true sort of historically as well, we've always been like the barometer for economic health in the UK. So I think with the upcoming budget, a lot of people are looking to this industry as a way to see what's going to happen. So I think there's cause to be optimistic.
I'll get into the long-term look in a moment, but I want to focus on the budget, which is set to be announced tomorrow.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it's going to be tough and challenging.
Yeah.
And that sort of has put everyone on notice a little bit, particularly those within the industry, because a difficult budget is likely going to hit consumers, potentially in their back pocket, certainly in terms of their confidence. Their spending's going to be down, which is obviously what we're trying to drive through the festive season. But economically, the circumstances beyond whatever comes of tomorrow's budget, there was an interest rate cut in August that hasn't quite had the impact that we hope it would. Inflation is starting to ease a little bit, although it's been very, very stubborn, and it's, again, not quite easing at the rate that people had have hoped.
Yeah.
Why should consumers themselves be feeling optimistic and encouraged to spend? Because everything I see about the optimism, it's for marketing, the advertising industry in general. We can still promote growth because of things like AI and tech innovation. But what about consumers, who are the target audience for all the marketing? I'm not seeing much that's going to give them any cause for optimism or any cause to start spending, which is why the push for things like Black Friday, Prime Day, which was a couple of weeks ago, Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up in November, has been particularly big this season.
You're right. As a consumer, I'm not seeing a lot of reasons to be optimistic. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of reasons to be cautious of how I spend. So before I touch upon the big retail sales, just sort of what you're saying about consumers, things to expect tomorrow, right? We know that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has got a big black hole to fill left by her predecessors. It's something like £22 billion, right? Now, where's she going to get that from?
Very good question.
Right. Now, a lot of the rumours are circulating around things like capital gains tax, inheritance tax, stamp duty, fuel duty, employer national insurance contributions. Now, they're all going to affect consumer and their personal spending and how much they can spend, but also maybe some of the smaller businesses as well. That's something to be mindful of. So when it comes to these big days, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, even just some of the retailers' own big sales day, because that's what they're doing now.
Discounts for the festive season, Christmas, Halloween, what have you.
Exactly. So you're going to get more savvy shoppers, people looking to optimize their buying, their gifts for Christmas and stuff around those big days. And they're going to be doing their research from now, looking at how much things are costing and seeing when the discounts do come, if it's worth it. So I don't think they won't be spending. I think they'll be more, like I said, savvy.
It's a fascinating time for the industry. And when I look at it as someone outside looking in from a journalist perspective, it appears to be a little bit of a misstep in that I think you're right. Consumers are going to spend in Q4, but it's the lower funnel that's going to drive that spend. It is these seasonal events, which is obviously a short-term approach, because in the short term, marketers are probably going to increase their ad spend in Q4 as opposed to Q3. I imagine the next bellwether, we're going to see growth, and subsequently, we'll see a little bit more spending from consumers, which gives us cause to be optimistic. But looking beyond that, obviously tomorrow's budget is going to set the lay of the land for the mid to near, sort of the short term to mid future. We've also got the US election coming up in November, which stands to have big global influence. And then we've got ongoing conflict in the Middle East that, I hate to be a naysayer, doesn't look like it's going to reach a conclusion within the short term, certainly not the immediate future, and an ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia that's happening in Europe. So there's a lot of conflict, a lot of big global events that are going to impact things both in the short and long term when we're looking ahead to the new year. It makes me worried that people are just, this short-termism is really coming to the fore a little bit.
You always get that in Q4, I think. It's the end of the year. People are more reflective than they are looking forward a little bit. But you're right. Beyond that, it's with the US elections, it is really tight. It is hard to call, and that uncertainty is also having an impact. You know, if there was one sure front runner, I think the markets would be a little bit more stable, but there isn't. And it is switching. We're looking at the polls on a daily basis. I know you said yesterday Trump was slightly ahead. When I looked, was it later that day? Yeah, at the end of the day.
Things had swung back a little bit.
Yeah. Kamala Harris was in the lead. And you're talking a point difference.
They're saying it could be tens of thousands that separate the entire outcome, which is astronomically close. It's borderline impossible to get something so split evenly.
Yeah, and I think that is going to have an impact, at least in the short term. In the long term, obviously, depending on who is elected, it will affect business confidence.
It's fascinating, and you've hit the nail on the head, because Q4 always there's a push for performance tactics and lower funnel, and then there's a bit of a reset in Q1 where people look to the long term, take stock of where they are and respond. But all of these factors that we've just raised that should be perhaps cause for concern, certainly cause for caution, again, I just think they're really going to influence consumers. I don't know where consumers are going to start spending, particularly if here in the UK, the economy's not going to have some big uptick early next year. But I need to raise, looking ahead to ad spend forecasts in terms of real term growth, which has been predicted to decline over the past sort of 12 to 18 months. Looking ahead to the future, S&P Global Market Intelligence has re-evaluated its prediction of UK GDP growth, and it's now forecasting growth for 2024 of 1.2%. That's up from an estimation of 0.6% in the previous bellwether, and that growth is estimated to hold, getting up to almost 2% by 2029 through the next sort of decade. So people are optimistic, certainly from an Adlam perspective, that there is going to be real-term growth into the long-term future.
I don't doubt that. The markets have calmed down a little bit. If you think about everything that's happened over the last maybe 2 years, right? 2023 and even this year, globally, we've had so many elections. It's been a massive year for sporting events. We've had a couple of years where it's been a bit unusual, the climate. So I think things are going to settle down. And I think that's why we're probably going to see a little bit more of real-term growth, because when things are a bit calmer, it's easier to predict and people are more likely to spend a bit more. Now, saying that, I know media inflation is always a hot topic of discussion. It's interesting that in the UK, we're likely to see media inflation stagnate a little bit compared to the other markets over the next 2 years. According to, this is the World Federation of Advertisers Outlook report, overall globally it's forecast media inflation to rise to about 4.6% by 2026, but in the UK that figure's about 2.10%.
Wow.
So I think that's suggesting quite a lot of optimism.
And optimism, I respect anyone who's optimistic. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but when I'm just looking at the current conditions, we've said that should there be a return to normalcy, in air quotes, in the future, then sure, I see cause for optimism and I can see courses correcting. But the last half decade, if it's proven one thing, it's that normalcy doesn't really exist anything.
Well, I was just going to say,
anymore.
what is normal?
What is normal? This idea of something being, nothing's unprecedented anymore. Not when you look at... But what makes me optimistic, if anything, is this idea that we just had this big year of global sporting events that probably buoyed growth.
Yes.
As much as growth was curtailed by other international conflict and economic turbulence. Next year, perhaps, if turbulent times remain, there will be other events and seasonal opportunities to jump on that will drive growth. And maybe short-termism is there's always going to be short-term opportunities to jump on, and it will help a long-term success just if you're continually on it and you don't miss out on these things.
Yeah, and also you're forgetting that the way marketing and the advertising industry is evolving. We are seeing a lot more people spread their costs out across different funnels. And one of the things I think we're going to be seeing is more of an uptick in audio next year, more spend moving towards some of the performance channels, especially around CTV. So I think, like, in terms of real-time growth, we're going to be seeing a more broader area of spend. I mean, there's going to be the standard big ticket events, like I think the Women's Euro 2025 is happening next year, where you'll still see, TV ads or traditional linear ads, should I say. But it's going to be, more spread out.
If there's one thing I've learned since covering this industry, it's that Adland always finds a way. And often it does lean on performance marketing in times of trouble. And yet those that do really embrace the full funnel, as we've been saying for quite some time now, they are the ones that can sort of prosper. They do well in the short term as well as in the long term. And honestly, for any listeners who are thinking, what do I need to do in the future? It's probably more of the same. You've got to be on your toes. You've got to be flexible. You need to be ready to adapt, but you can't neglect a long-term plan. But I trust our listeners and the broader advertising community to continue to find a way, as it has done for so many years, in spite of all of the turbulent circumstances that have surrounded us, both domestically and globally.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be talking all about it next year as well, won't we?
You bet we will. For now, we'll end the conversation there. There's always so much to say, Jyoti, but I really appreciate you joining us for a look at the latest IPA Bellwether, tomorrow's upcoming autumn budget, as well as the big events that continue to hamper and influence things for next year and beyond.
Cool. Thanks, Joe.
Hello, Performance Marketing Unlocked listeners. Host Joe here, briefly interrupting your listening to tell you about a brand new event from Performance Marketing World that you can get involved with, the PMW Forum. The inaugural PMW Forum will be taking place from Wednesday, the 4th of December through until Thursday, the 5th of December of this year. And it's your opportunity to get some one-on-one time with senior performance marketers. It's a free to attend event that will take place overnight at Wooton House in Surrey. Topics discussed at the event will include emerging trends, the evolution of AI, the best channels to invest in, and much more. You'll be hearing from the likes of Ollie Shea at Boots, Monzo's Kat Daniel, Co-op's April Cox, as well as Robin Langford, our head honcho and esteemed editor, and many more performance experts. A big thank you to our proud partners of the 2024 PMW Forum, Quantcast, Yahoo, Dept, IDHL, and Journey Further. For any and all information on attending the event or even becoming a supplier, you can find out more by going to forum.performancemarketingworld.com, or you can go to the top of our website and click on the little ad for the forum there, and you can register your interest and find out more. Looking forward to seeing you all there for a cheeky little Christmas getaway interwoven with some invaluable networking. Now, back to the show. Dyana, hello and welcome to the Performance Marketing Unlocked studio. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's exciting. You are a veteran of Google, I would say, with more than 15 years of experience. That's a lot of time to have been at one of the biggest tech brands in the world, if not the biggest.
It is. And the irony is that it passes so quickly and it doesn't feel like 15 years. So
you would have seen a lot of change at the company in that time, because 15 years, when we're talking the age of a tech company, it's a bit like when you're talking about dog years, you know, 15 years for companies, they often come pretty thick and fast. Have things changed dramatically as I think they might have since you first joined?
Oh, wow. I've seen so many shifts. When I joined, it was the exit of the portal, then the rise of mobile, the rise of, YouTube exploding and people watching more online and on video, the rise of CTV, and now the AI revolution. So every couple of years, there's been a really pivotal shift, and it's just been so exciting to be part of that. And I think that's why it doesn't feel like 15 years, because we've just had constant change and innovation.
Now, we're going to come back to the YouTube partnership in more detail later on in the episode, but I just want to ask, your role has put you across that partnership on an advertising front for quite some time and at quite a high level. What was it like sort of being across YouTube when it was really from the ground floor up? Because it started as just such a small little video sharing website, and it's really blossomed into what it is today. What was that like?
Yeah, so I've spent the majority of my tenure has involved YouTube in some shape or form. And definitely in the early days, it was the cats on skateboard discussion. And advertisers were excited and curious, but the capabilities were really limited. We had a masthead, and we had a reservation ad and a skippable ad. And today, there's just been so much innovation on the platform, shifts and growth in user behavior and how they're interacting with multi-format on the platform, the growth of CTV, AI injecting new capabilities. And so it's been amazing to see the platform grow and mature in terms of both how consumers are building deep and lasting relationships with our creators, but also how the platform has been able to help advertisers grow their business and capabilities as well.
In your current position with Google, you cover both YouTube as well as search. And search is something we here at PMW talk about a lot because it changes dramatically. Already advertising is a very fluid industry, but search is a very, very fluid part of advertising. What do you think the current state of the search landscape is? And how is consumer behavior changing on that front? And what impact is that having?
So again, I think we're at an exciting point for search as well. It's really an inflection point in our industry. If you think on one hand, we have this incredibly mature product, which is 26 years old. It's ubiquitous with our daily lives. And on the other, we're in the midst of this AI revolution, which is really supercharging our capabilities. I mean, for Google alone, we're 100 times more efficient now with our AI than we were 2 years ago. So that's allowing us to do more, but it's also, I believe, recontracting consumer expectations of their expectations with our products. And we see a couple of shifts on search. Firstly, what we call the growth of the exactly what I want search. And this is where traditionally we'd see people searching user shorter queries. And so, myself, I have 2 kids, as I mentioned. And if we're planning a holiday, I would typically search for a family-friendly hotel. I'd open 20 tabs and I'd manually look through. Then I would search again and continue that process. Today, because my expectations of what search can give me have grown, I'm much more likely to search for a family-friendly hotel with a kids club and a swimming pool. And I think that's like 10 words. And we're seeing
and
this...
a view of the beach, and it's 30 degrees every day, and very, very hyper-specific search.
Super, and a gym and whatnot. And we're seeing these search queries with at least 5 or more words going 5 times faster than the shorter queries. So there's definitely a shift in that window of what people are expecting. And at least 15% of queries we see on a daily basis are new and have never been seen before. So that's a really interesting shift in behavior. The second one is what we call searching beyond words. And this is one that I'm particularly excited about because people are finding new ways to search that go beyond the traditional search box. And so with image search and voice search and even humming, which we can give it a try if you like, you can look for things in new ways. And here we're seeing 12 billion visual searches a month using Lens, with a quarter of these having commercial intent. So again, your t-shirt's super cool, can take a picture of it, and the image search will show me where I can buy it. If I overlay, but I want this in pink, it can help me find it in different colors. And so I think that multimodality is becoming really interesting as well for people.
Obviously, when search has become far more effective in terms of the way people can search, you can now paint with a broader brush, or you can choose to really narrow the scope to something hyper-specific, as you've said, and you can go beyond just a text-based search. You can use image and even humming, as you mentioned there. I can't help but think that means the expectations consumers have for search increases pretty exponentially. where if consumers aren't getting exactly what they want on a first search basis, as opposed to opening up those multiple tabs that we may have done in the past, then a potential consumer, they might look elsewhere. They might do something. They might go somewhere else for their discovery, let's say. So what challenge does this changing consumer search behavior and subsequent expectations present for brands and advertisers? You said a lot of these searches have a commercial aspect to them.
So we've always been user first in terms of our product development and our approach to innovation. And that's certainly true for search as well. If we look at something like AI overviews, that's been one of the most significant launches and changes that we've made to search in the past couple of decades. And again, that is really in response to this shift that we're seeing. And with AI overviews, when you search for something, especially a more complex query, the Google search will deliver an AI-produced summary at the top of the search results page. And that's really in response to that growing need to provide users with fast information that they don't have to troll through. And we're seeing really good engagement here, high user satisfaction, high engagement with the overview, and more qualified traffic to the advertiser websites. So I think it's things like that that are really helping to respond to that, I don't want to call it impatience, but that shift in user behavior in terms of the wanting something here and now.
What about discovery and the impact that social media has had on changing that landscape? I know TikTok, for example, has become a very popular platform for search and discovery in many cases, as has, you could say, Meta's Instagram and Facebook to some extent as well. What does that do from Google's perspective in terms of competition and swaying people back to the more mainstream searching on the Google platform as opposed to looking for their search and discovery in social media?
Yeah, it's a great question. We like to think that discovery happens in many places, but decisions are made on Google. And I think I've certainly experienced that firsthand. Do you know about the cottage cheese trend?
I don't. I'm constantly being told about trends I don't know or hear about. As someone who's like very active across marketing and advertising, I should be more on the ball with
more
them.
in tune.
But the Brat Demure one took me all of 3 or 4 months to catch on. And by the time I learned what they were from my younger brother informing me back home in Australia, they were already too old for me to do anything with. So no, I don't know about the cottage cheese trend, I'm afraid.
There's all this hype that actually we have a cottage cheese shortage because of all these online recipes about cottage cheese. And they're very appealing. They're on social media. They make it look so easy to do these quirky things with eggs and with, I think there was one with mustard. But short of it is, you try them and they don't work. And I've definitely had that experience. And so now, in the rare occasion that I try and make something, I turn to Google to find a proper recipe. And it's not to shoot down what people are seeing on social media, but that's certainly been, I believe, the experience for many people. And I saw an Ipsos study recently that showed, of consumers surveyed, they said that Google is the number one place that they turn to for information that they can trust. And so again, so while those discoveries happen in many places, I do believe that, search and YouTube also has the same relationship as consumers, is where people go for information that they can trust that certainly then goes on to inform their decision making.
I've certainly had my failed TikTok search experiences. I think back to the Big Mac tacos that did nothing but ruin a pan of mine in the kitchen. It's interesting, though, and I think drawing that comparison, it's pretty hard to argue that these platforms and social media in particular hasn't become, in many ways, a legitimate search tool, particularly on the discovery front. But certainly there are different mediums and channels that have a little bit more reputation behind them for real-world impact. And I know YouTube, for example, when I'm in trouble, the first thing I do is go to YouTube and I'll say, my boiler's broken because some light's off. How do I fix it? Yeah. A lot of maintenance, which I think just is part of renting a flat in London. Mine are usually maintenance-based searches. But what about the YouTube partnership? Because aside from search, working alongside YouTube, something you've done for a long time, and it's something that you're doing in this current role too. How is the partnership with YouTube helping Google search and the broader Google brand?
YouTube is such an exciting platform. There's now 46 million people coming to YouTube every single month in the UK. And one of our fastest growing channels is CTV. So there's incredible engagement and depth. And there's also a unique relationship that consumers have with the creators on the platform. We just had our YouTube festival last week, and it was an incredible experience bringing together some of our biggest advertisers, some of our most exciting creators, just to allow them to experience firsthand why they have such a captivating relationship with their audiences. And so YouTube plays a really special role in that dynamic. It's helping to build with brand building and find new audiences and make those connections. But it's also helping to connect the full funnel with search. So you're creating your demand, you're finding more people, and then you're meeting your consumers where they are when they're searching for something and when they have that intent. So they work really well in harmony as we work through the funnel. And we're seeing advertisers really take advantage of that. We just launched an exciting initiative or opportunity for brands to take over creator channels called Creator Takeovers, where they can buy 100% share of voice or a roadblock. And Coke did this recently with Tomorrowland Festival so that they could show up every time somebody engaged with that content. And they also amplified it with our video reach campaigns, which are AI driven and help you to reach as many people as possible. And so you see that YouTube is playing that really critical role in, finding audiences at scale as they engage with content and creators that they're really passionate about, and then creating that demand and discovery as well.
Can you speak to the popularity of YouTube's long form versus short term content on an advertising front? Because something that's come up a lot in my coverage recently is this idea of, particularly among younger audiences, that short form content is king. But then services like Twitch, for example, have been really pulling back and pushing back on this idea that younger audiences, there is scope for their attention span to go beyond a few seconds at a time into long form content. And I know YouTube sits quite well in that it serves both of those needs.
Yeah.
What about advertisers? Is there something that appeals to them more than others?
So we've always believed in meeting the user where they are, and the pivot to shorter form and introducing shorts a couple of years ago was in response to that, especially as we see more consumption happening on the mobile and just making sure that we're creating opportunities for content to be consumed in a way that makes sense for the user. I think for creators, what I see and hear is short form is really important for them as a discovery tool in particular, because if you think of shorts and the way people engage with shorts, it's really creating that visibility and awareness and leading people to the longer form content. And we still see massive engagement with the long form. But I believe that's why for many creators, YouTube is really at the heart of their production, because they're able to do both with that multi-format. They're able to produce the long form content that they're passionate about and that their users engage with and are passionate about, supercharged by the short form to help with that discovery and to help find new audiences as well. And it's also where you see a lot of their stuff showing up on other social media. I think for advertisers, the beauty is with AI, they don't really have to worry about it, because with AI-powered formats, we can trim ads, we can change orientation really easily so that they're able to create assets and then let the AI do the work of figuring out how much should go in the short form versus the long form versus the skippable. And that's really the power of things like video view campaigns and video reach campaigns. They take that complexity away.
Hello, Performance Marketing Unlocked listeners. I'm Reem, PMW's news reporter, and I'm here to briefly interrupt your listening to bring you the latest headlines and stories from the PMW news desk in just 60 seconds, starting now. Big changes from Google ahead of the holiday season as it removes Performance Max's priority over standard shopping campaigns and encourages advertisers to adjust their strategies. In other news, X and Unilever have patched things up as the company was dropped from X's ad boycott after agreeing to a new ad partnership. Good news for affiliate marketing in the UK, as it is now outperforming digital ad spend by 50%, accounting for 10% of all e-commerce transactions. On the B2B side, Pipeline 360 research shows that nearly half of marketers are struggling to hit their goals this year due to budget cuts and misaligned strategies. Cookies continue to be an issue, as over a third of Brits say they'll reject third-party cookies when Google rolls out its opt-in user choice feature in Chrome. And lastly, Amazon Ads made a big splash at their Unboxed event, unveiling AI-powered tools to boost full-funnel advertising and help advertisers with real-time optimization and reporting. That's all for this week's 60-second news roundup, and thank you for listening. Now back to Joe and Diana.
AI. It's a topic on everyone's mind, and the term's become synonymous with Google in many ways. And I was fortunate enough to go to GML Live earlier this year out at your Silicon Valley HQ. And AI was obviously the talk of the town. You said at the start of the episode that Google's AI, use of AI, has become 100 times more efficient in the past 2 years. What does that mean? Is that efficiency in terms of innovation, in terms of output, in terms of brand partnerships? Exactly what does 100 times more efficient in terms of AI mean?
So in that context, in terms of efficiency, in terms of how we can power the AI and deliver outputs. But to answer your question more broadly, AI has been at the heart of our DNA for over a decade. And back in 2015, we pivoted to being an AI-first company, really building AI into the core of our consumer products and advertiser solutions. And every couple of years since then, we've had significant breakthroughs in machine learning models and the ability actually for machines to understand and process natural language in the same way that we do. And so I do believe that we've been at the forefront in pioneering research into this space. And because we publish that research, we make developments across the industry possible as well. And on that 100 times spectrum as well, we've had breakthroughs like AlphaFold, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
No, you'll have to tell me about it.
AlphaFold was I guess one of the most significant discoveries that DeepMind had over the past few years. And it was the ability to predict the protein structure of 200 million proteins. So pretty much all of the proteins known to science in less than a year. Whereas usually it would take somebody an entire PhD to understand just a single protein. And so if you think of what that's done, it's saved thousands of years of research, but it's just catapulted the possibilities in sciences and environmental advancements to discover new drugs for malaria and new vaccines and even protein-eating enzymes. So, when we say 100 times, it's in that context of AI is really advancing so fast, and it's allowing the capabilities and not just our advertising solutions, but the way that we can impact healthcare and society and our everyday lives at a really rapid scale.
The real world impact is something that's very much out there in practice, as you say.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think anyone could argue that in the past 12 to 24 months, AI as a buzzword has certainly kicked off, particularly into the mainstream. And generative AI is really spearheading that movement. Launch of ChatGPT and subsequent large language models are the first things that come to mind because it's very consumer facing and just everyday person can interact with these LLMs. Is there a bit of an AI arms race when you think about the other big players? You've got Perplexity, you've got Microsoft's OpenAI, Nvidia's become a big player in this space. How fierce is that competition? Or is it very much you're a horse running your race with the blinkers on? Are you aware of what those other players are doing?
So firstly, I think competition is great for innovation. It really fuels the industry. However, going back to what I said about AI being at the core of our DNA, I think that the work we're doing is really focused on how we can actually make AI helpful for everybody. And the developments, whether they are in the sciences or in the healthcare or in our products or in our everyday lives, are really focused on how we can drive that accessibility in the industry, but also how we can launch AI boldly and do things like AlphaFold, but also responsibly. And I think part of the challenge with what you call the AI race is there's sometimes been a rush to get things out prematurely to drive that adoption and really hinge on to the excitement in the industry. Whereas I believe we've taken a much more balanced approach in making sure that as we launch things, they're governed by our AI principles that really ensure that we're holding ourselves accountable for ensuring that, AI is having a net positive impact, that it's not doing any harm, that it's not reinforcing bias, etc., that it's being stringently tested by an internal process we have called red teaming, which I'm happy to talk about if it's helpful. And that so we're putting things out responsibly. And sometimes that may mean having to go a bit slower, but doing so in a really thoughtful way.
When making sure that the R&D and everything that is released on the AI front is brand safe and safe to use, and it's not going to result in I think of social media, there's been some pretty infamous AI flubs of late, and that idea of not reinforcing bias and making sure that it's not pushing rhetoric on things in its responses. Talk to me more about those measures that are put in place. Are those something that are quite fluid? Are they constantly analysed? Are they ever changing as much as the technology itself?
Yeah. So that's what the red teaming does. And it's actually a term that I found interesting, was coined by the military, where they believe it was during the Cold War, where the notion was the best defense is a strong offense. And you would have a red team and a blue team, and the red team would simulate an enemy attack and try to infiltrate your defense barrier. And so we have exactly the same thing internally. We have a red team whose job it is to try and hack the system and try and imitate what are the behaviors or use cases that a bad actor would try to do with this technology. And so all releases go through that process before they're made available. Because obviously once you're putting stuff out there, it's really hard to retract it. And like anything, there are always missteps, I believe, but I do think that, or I have seen that incredible measures have been taken to make sure that we are circumventing any harm that could be done.
It must be fun being on the red team. You can go in there and see if you can't break down your own product.
I know.
And act a little nefariously.
I did look them up. I was very curious.
Our audience here is obviously a lot of marketers and advertisers. And just recently, I know Google's been doing a lot with Performance Max in the lead up to peak season, with adding some additional AI-powered updates and things like that. What can we expect to see in terms of opportunities for brands and advertisers on the AI front coming in from Google? What is Google doing that nobody else is that we can see in future that advertisers, brands, savvy marketers listening can get ready to take advantage of?
So we continue to innovate and constantly listening to the market and trying to understand how products like Performance Max are being helpful and how we can continue to evolve them. I'd say there are innovations happening across three main fronts. The first is the creative, and you mentioned Gen AI, and that's definitely the one that I think advertisers are really benefiting from the most at the moment, because it's really easy to engage with. And some of the creative launches that we've recently had that have been really exciting include a conversational experience in Google Ads. So you can, instead of manually creating your campaign, you're able to use a chatbot, basically, to explain what you want, and it gets it started for you and starts to create assets. And of course, you can continue to edit and refine, and nothing is launched until you sign off on it. But it's really a great Kickstarter using Gen AI. And similarly with PMax, an advertiser can just simply enter their URL and it will pull assets from their website and create hundreds of copy for them that they can use, and again, to get started. And we have really cool image editing tools that save on hefty production costs. So creating clean cuts or 3D model images of a product. And when I think of, there's lots of benefits for large advertisers who are the advertisers we work with. But when I think of the broader economy and smaller businesses, so my husband has his own business and he would definitely fall into that space. The democratization it offers in terms of content creation and giving access to that small business community to produce images and videos and content that they would usually not have production costs to do is really amazing. So creative is one big part. The second is media. And as you mentioned, Performance Max, Broad Match, I mentioned video reach campaigns, demand gen, like all of these format types are constantly being developed to give advertisers more control, more transparency, more brand controls, especially in PMax, because Performance Max. In case not everyone knows the lingo, one of the feedback we got was the concern that when you're creating all of this Gen AI produced images, how
much control?
Yeah. And so this brand, you're able as a brand to enter your brand guidelines, and so the AI will respect all the font, the color scheme, etc. when producing those assets. So seeing lots of exciting developments there. And the third really important one is measurement. And usually the question I get from advertisers is, if everyone's using the same AI, how do I differentiate?
You've taken the words out of my mouth.
Was that your next
exactly
question?
what I was going to ask.
And really AI is only as powerful as the data you give it. And so one of the key differentiators is first-party data. And of course, it's important to invest in durable measurement because of signal loss and other factors. But one of the biggest benefits for advertisers is really to get their first-party data infrastructure in a good place so that they're able to supercharge AI with their own data and their own insights. And that's a true differentiator as well. So we work very closely on that.
So it's interesting looking at it from a Google perspective, particularly with Chrome and the relevance third-party cookies still have there. This idea of pushing first-party data because of impending signal loss and whatever the users are going to do when they get their user choice, you would say that it's still critical for brands, advertisers to be investing in their own pool of first-party data, with AI as a large reason for that.
I think AI is the reason for that. I mean, Chrome wasn't the beginning of signal loss, so we've had signal loss over the years from
Apple
various
and Safari and all these things.
So obviously that was an important reason, but actually more so it's to ensure that you're fueling AI with the right data. And so we spend a lot of time on that and a lot of time on media effectiveness as well, and making sure that advertisers, again, are using the right data points in order to measure how effective their campaigns are performing.
This is what I hear a lot of these days. AI, it is only as good as whatever you input to it and the prompts you give it. And who knows, these will probably be jobs for people in the future if they're not already. I don't know what's going on inside Google. Dyana, we are almost out of time, but we can't leave without doing PMW's famous Resell Me a Pen challenge. I know you're very excited about this. And why don't you reveal to myself and the listeners what it is you're going to attempt to resell this week as I get up the little timer clock.
I'm going to resell you a modem, and I'll tell you don't need your timer because I only need 10 seconds.
Okay, before we jump in, I love the confidence. Can you just define for our listeners exactly what a modem is, in the sense of what it is you're reselling the product itself?
Yeah, so if you think back to those days when we had a physical device that you plugged into the wall to get online, and it made that noise like tick, 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 tick. So that is a modem.
Terrific. All right, well, 60 seconds on the clock. We'll see how much of it you need.
I will say, though, my target market, because I'm a marketer at heart, my target market is parents.
Okay, target market is parents. Can't help but think that's coming from personal experience a little bit here. Should you need it, I will give you a warning at 10 seconds and 5 seconds remaining. But Dyana, your time to resell the modem starts now.
Okay, so you should buy a modem because it will make getting online so painful, your kids would rather read a book.
8 seconds. 8 seconds.
Would you buy one?
I mean, I don't have children personally, but I've got younger brothers, and there were certainly times growing up as an adolescent when I'd rather they weren't online. Amazing. You stuck true to your word. Better than that, even so. That experience rings true, does it? Sometimes you want your children spending a little less time online than they do.
Yes, and actually, I don't know if you've seen the latest EE campaign, but it's all anchored around the control that you can have to switch devices on and off at home. So yeah, for sure.
It's so funny that for so long, all anyone wanted was just internet all
Yes.
the time, wherever they are. And now people are saying we've got enough internet.
Yeah.
We really need to monitor it, particularly parents when they've got kids that have access to the whole world of everything that's out there. And they want a little bit more control of just enough's enough. And a modem, there we go. They're painful to use. They take too long, and they'll encourage your children to go, hey, internet's out. We've got to go find an alternative.
Exactly.
I think that was a brilliant effort, and well and truly under time. So you've set a crazy bar. Who knows, maybe the next season of the podcast, it's going to be 10 seconds to resell us an outdated product or service.
Thank you.
Dyana, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out here to Twickenham. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thanks, Joe.
And that concludes this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Firstly, I need to thank our premium content editor and my esteemed colleague Jyoti Rambhai for joining me at the top of the episode to discuss tomorrow's autumn budget and the broader IPA Bellwether Report about the economic standings in terms of ad land here in the UK and internationally. And also a big thank you to Dyana and Najdi for joining me to talk all things Google, search, AI, their partnership with YouTube and beyond. Finally, as always, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you, the loyal listener, for tuning in each and every fortnight as you do. Don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to our show on your podcast platform of choice. We're also all over social media these days on LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. Just search for Performance Marketing World. That's all from me this week. We will be back, as always, in a fortnight's time with another episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. In the meantime, have an amazing week and bye for now.